Hi, welcome to Chad Silversmithing. First, thanks for coming to visit my channel. I appreciate you watching. If you would, helps me out a lot if you'd hit the like button before you leave. I wanted to give a special shout out to my patrons over at Patreon. Thank you for signing up. It's your patronage of me that helps make this possible. I appreciate it. If you'd like to see one of the new video tutorials I just uploaded over at Patreon, should be an animation showing up on the screen right about now. So click the link in my video description. You can also support me by buying me a coffee if you're so inclined, although it's not required. Either way, enjoy the video. I hope you learned something. Today, I wanted to focus mostly on some practices in the jewelry industry related to gemstones that can be viewed as deceptive or misleading. And so I have quite a bit of information here. I'm going to try and keep it as organized as I can. To enjoy the video. All right, when you start to talk about deceptive practices in the gemstone industry, it's important to have some common language about what we're talking about when we're talking about deceptive practices. Most dealers that I deal with are honest and have integrity and don't try to pull the wool over their customers' eyes, and that's nice. That is not 100% true though. And generally, the other concept we need to talk about, generally most treatments are fine in the gemstone industry as long as they're disclosed to the customer that is buying them so that they know what they're getting. Okay, we need to distinguish a couple of things. There's two terms that are thrown around a lot, synthetic and simulated. So a synthetic stone is one that's actually occurs in nature, but we figured out how to produce it scientifically in a laboratory setting. Those things have been going on for a long time. I think since the early 1900s, they were making synthetic sapphires and synthetic rubies, and somewhere along the line, synthetic emeralds came along. But the big thing about those at the beginning was they were so perfect that they were pretty easy to distinguish between from natural stones, and so it was not hard for people to know that they were getting a synthetic gemstone. The cool thing about synthetics are that they have the same physical characteristics as gemstones, and most precious and semi-precious gemstones, what were traditionally called those, have really high hardnesses, and that's a desirable quality in a gemstone so that it doesn't scratch or break easily. Synthetic ones have those same characteristics. So if you have a synthetic ruby or a synthetic sapphire, it will have a real high hardness, and that's good. More recently, the science has gotten so good on creating gemstones in the laboratory that some are being made that are really hard to distinguish from natural stones, although generally a skilled gemologist can tell those kinds of things. Me not being a skilled gemologist, so I wouldn't be able to tell the difference, but there are some ways to make educated guesses, and we'll probably do another video on that at some point. The other term that's thrown out is simulated. And simulated, what that means is you're taking a different substance and trying to make it look like an actual gemstone. The one that I've seen on the market a lot is simulated tanzanite, and I'm not sure what they make it out of, but it's not actually tanzanite, it's some other substance. So, like I said, most people are honest, but when people do misinform you, some of the ways that they'll do this are selling synthetic stones as a natural stone, like we talked about. And like I said, it's not always apparent anymore whether it's natural or synthetic, and so sometimes it takes a trained gemologist to be able to tell. The second thing is selling simulated stones as real. There's a ton of different ways to talk, or a ton of different things to talk about with this one. The one that jumps to mind for me at first was probably 15 years ago on the market. Something started showing up. It was a really kind of pretty stone. They called it rainbow calsilica. And for years, people didn't know whether it was a natural or a simulated stone. It looked sort of simulated because of the bright colors in it and banding. And it eventually turned out it was a formation caused by the runoff from a pottery factory, I think in Mexico, and it was the different glazes that had hardened and formed layers, so it had some interesting stripiness to it, and that turned out to be not a real stone. Of course, glass is used frequently to simulate diamonds and other gemstones. Usually, since a lot of the finer gemstones are pretty hard, if your stone in your ring has a lot of chips in it, it's probably not a diamond. So, but plastic is used in place of a lot of stones too anymore. And one of the things that jumps out to me too was when the movie Jurassic Park came out. There was a huge jump in demand for amber on the market, and so all sorts of people were making fake amber. And it was pretty easy generally to tell if something was fake amber or not, because most times they were selling the most outrageous things. They would have this piece of resin with a gigantic scorpion in the middle of it or something like that. So it was usually pretty obvious. Although if they were smart, they would not do things like that, and they would just pass it off as actual amber when it was just plastic. So there's some ways to tell that. You'll have to look it up. I don't remember all the specifics about testing amber. But one thing I do know is if you touch a hot piece of metal to amber, it generally smells kind of like a pine tree burning. So that's one way you can test it, although if you have a gemstone, you might not have a spot where you can do that. Opal gets simulated a lot in various ways. I've seen plastic, I've seen, they make a material called opalized glass, where they put some kind of a metal powder into the glass as it's molten, and it has some color play in it. That's pretty convincing sometimes, and so it's hard to tell that apart. There's a lot of synthetic opal on the market. They figured out how to do that a long time ago. And that is usually so garishly opalized that it's pretty easy to tell. It looks fake to me anyway. Some other ones that are frequently passed off as natural stones. This is a substance called goldstone, and it comes in different colors. It comes in purples and greens, but mostly you see this orange. And it's all glittery, and it's sort of sparkly like the night sky, so it's cool in that sense. But the very name that they call it, goldstone, is deceptive. It's not a stone, it's glass. So things like that. Fiber optic glass. I've seen various shades of this. It's just glass, and it's all got fibers running through it, so it has that optical effect when you cut it into a gemstone shape. And I've seen that sold as tiger's eye or cat's eye, which is actually chrysoberyl. There's a lot of different colors of it, like I said. So dichroic glass is fine as long as you tell people it's glass. I've seen people selling this as a gemstone. It has kind of interesting characteristics. It was really popular 15 or 20 years ago, and it still shows up now and again. Some people just love it. But a lot of people who come along and ask me about it say, what stone is that? So people just generally don't realize that it's glass, so be aware of that. I don't have an example of this one, but there's something on the market called Fordite, and it's really brightly striped. It looks like a really brightly striped agate of various colors, and I don't think most people try to deceive you with it, and the name itself gives away what it is. They first started getting it from the walls of the old Ford paint rooms where they painted the cars, because it would build up layers of different colors of paint, and they come out as stripes when you cut the stuff into a stone shape. And some of it's really pretty and got some cool shapes to it, but it's definitely not stone. Honestly, most of the fakes are pretty obvious, but somebody getting into the industry early on might not know of all of these different things, so it's just mostly for information. Okay, so another thing people do is they use a deceptive name to sell a product. So the one that I remember most is, because it was probably my first time I ran across something like this. I was a kid, and my mom bought this ring with a smoky quartz in it, and the guy sold it to her as smoky topaz. And I've since over the years heard a few people use that term, and that is a non-existent stone. It's a way to make your smoky quartz sound a little bit more exotic. So smoky topaz is not topaz, it's actually smoky quartz. So if anybody tries to tell you otherwise, they are incorrect. There are different shades of topaz, and some are sort of golden brown, but generally when people use the term smoky topaz, they're trying to deceive you. Another one that used to kind of drive me bonkers was I saw this stone. This is actually a beet, but you can find cabochons of it sometimes, and people sell it as fire agate. And fire agate is a very specific type of agate that has kind of an oily sheen look to it inside. It looks like the kind of the way parking lots look after a rainstorm, and the oil kind of floats to the top of the puddles of water. It's kind of got that weird iridescence. That's what fire agate has. And this particular stuff is actually a type of carnelian. They call it spiderweb carnelian most of the time. So I've seen that. And there's other examples of that. I don't have all of the examples that exist out there. There's tons of them. So just as a general rule, if you see something called something, look it up online. You have another deceptive name, and this one's used a lot in the industry, is the term jasper. When they put a new stone on the market and it has stripes in it or some kind of pattern in it, even if it's not a jasper, sometimes they'll call it something or other jasper just because that kind of rolls off the tongue, I guess. And it's a catch-all name for stones that maybe don't have a very pretty name. This one is bumblebee jasper, and it is not even remotely a jasper. Jasper is a term that stands for opaque cryptocrystalline quartz, like usually with pretty patterns in it is what is usually termed what jasper means. This comes from some volcanic region in Indonesia, and it's mostly sulfur minerals and iron minerals, and I think there's calcite in it too. The next major category of deceptive information would be when someone sells you a gemstone and they don't disclose some sort of treatment that's been done to it. That's generally considered good practice if you are selling something that's stabilized or dyed, that you let people know that when you sell it to them. Not everybody will do that, and some people will deny that it's been treated sometimes, although that's rare. So, big common one I run across is dyed stones, and one of the most common ones you see is turquoise being made. Well, not turquoise, but simulated turquoise, basically, because they take howlite, which looks like this in its natural state, and they dye it with some kind of blue dye, and it turns out looking sort of like turquoise. So generally the hues of turquoise are a little bit more natural looking than this, so it's usually pretty obvious when you run across that stuff. Some other things about turquoise. This is an actual piece of turquoise, but sometimes they color enhance turquoise to make its color more intense. I don't know if this particular one has had that done, although the other thing that you see a lot in turquoise, especially from overseas, is that they've darkened the matrix to make it stand out against the color of the stone, which is actually kind of pretty. And I don't mind that too much, although generally they will deny that, but you rarely find turquoise with that dark of a matrix. So, let's see, some other processes. Some other stones that are dyed. I've seen a lot of dyed lapis over the years. They do it to make the color more intense. Let's see, turquoise they dye in a lot of different colors, and most times you can tell when it's dyed because it doesn't look natural at all usually. I've seen a lot of purple turquoise lately for some reason. One of the things to think about stuff that's been dyed is the color may not be stable in the stone. And I found that out the hard way once. I bought this stuff. This is cobra jasper that's been dyed purple. And I made a really pretty pendant out of it with a couple of these stones. And I put it in a gallery, and I came back about a year later and looked at it, and it was almost totally white, which is the color that cobra jasper generally is. So whatever they used to dye this stuff wasn't very color fast, and it ended up fading out over time. So that's good information that would have been nice to know in advance. Let's see, a lot of agates have been dyed. You find unnatural looking agate colors out there. Agate is relatively porous, which is surprising because it doesn't seem porous, but it will accept dye pretty well. And so if you run across agate that's really brightly colored, there's a good chance that it might have been dyed. So, but if it's usually that way, it's like garish colors, like bright, unnatural blue and stuff like that. That's probably dyed agate. Let's see. Another common treatment of gemstones, and this is particularly in transparent gemstones like quartz, sapphires, topaz, things like that, is heating and irradiation. A lot of times gemstones will change color when you heat them, and in the case of blue topaz, for instance, most of the topaz on the market that's blue topaz is not natural blue topaz. It's been heated, which changes its color blue, and then they irradiate it, which makes that stay blue, is my understanding. So, and that is fine. That's considered okay in the marketplace as long as it's disclosed, but a lot of people don't tell you that. Same, they do it with sapphires. I think they do it with diamonds now too. I don't know much about that. But definitely quartz, because like praisiolite, which is this pale green quartz, doesn't occur in nature generally. So I think what they do is they take amethyst and heat treat it, and it turns it different colors. Sometimes bright yellow, sometimes that kind of pale green color. So a lot of the citrine on the market has been heat treated as well. So, one that used to drive me crazy when I used to see it, and people just love it. To me, it looks tacky, but everybody has their own tastes. And it's this stuff, and it's called Mystic Topaz. And it's actually real topaz, but what they've done, it's just colorless topaz, and they use what's called a vapor deposition coating. And I think they vaporize titanium or some other metal like that, and it produces these coatings that have kind of what looks to me like carnival glass. So it looks cheap and tawdry to me a little bit, but to each his own. So as long as they tell you what's going on, that's fine. But that's a coating. Let's see. Another one, and this one I've seen a lot, like on jewelry television. They will market something that is the common form of a gemstone as the gemstone. So while aquamarine is the pale transparent blue version of beryl, I see a lot of really pretty much non-precious beryl being cabbed and sold as aquamarine, and technically it is the same stone, but usually it's only considered aquamarine if it's really clear and blue. And so when you make cabochons out of this really not clear pale blue stuff and call it aquamarine, that's sort of a misrepresentation. See that same way. Here's a rough ruby, and most rubies don't look very impressive until they're cut, but I guarantee if you cut this one, it's not going to look anything like one of these. Okay, these are actual, gem quality rubies. So this is the mineral for rubies and sapphires is corundum, and most of it is opaque. So when you find the clear ones, or the clear, pretty colored ones, that's when they're worth something. So, but you see a lot of stuff that's cut into cabochons and is vaguely reddish pink or something, and they call it a ruby. I don't know. That's kind of a toss-up whether I'd consider that a ruby or not. Finally, one of the things that jumped to mind when I was thinking of deceptive practices is, and it's particularly pertinent now because the industry for non-fine jewelry is the term a lot of people would use, where it doesn't have sapphires, emeralds, rubies, or diamonds in it, but less precious stones. The market exploded for different looking stones in recent years, and so they started putting things on the market that really don't make for very good gemstones because their physical properties are not very good. A gemstone, generally, you want it to be pretty hard so it stands up to wear and tear, because if you have something in a ring, people bang it on stuff all the time. So with something with a Mohs hardness of 8 or 9, you don't have to worry too much about that because they're pretty durable. But the one that really jumps to mind is a stone called seraphinite. And first saw this maybe, I don't know, 15 years ago again. And it's very pretty. And it comes, I think it comes from Russia. The thing is, it's got a hardness of about 2 on the Mohs scale, so you can scratch it with your fingernail. And so if you made this in a bracelet, for instance, you're almost guaranteed that that's going to break at some point because somebody's going to bang it into something and it's just going to fracture or get abraded really easily. So that would be something that you would want to let your customers know if you're setting a gemstone like that, so that they can take care of it. Same way with like an opal. If you're selling an opal ring to somebody, you should let them know that opals are a little bit on the fragile side and they should be careful when they wear that one. Those kind of things are important to building good customer relations, I think, and just part of being someone who has integrity in their business. So, well, I hope this was useful for you. I probably will think of some other things in the future that I hadn't thought of today, and hopefully I was able to put this into some sort of organized way for you to understand what I'm saying. All right, well, that was kind of fun talking about that stuff. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Don't forget to check out my Patreon and my Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description, and watch some other videos. I'd love to have you subscribe to my channel. I think you'll find there's a lot of useful content here. I'm trying to upload 3 videos per week, and I've been pretty consistent with that. So continuing to grow the channel and put up more useful content. So I hope you find it useful. Thanks for watching. Happy silversmithing. Take care.